And I just want to take this opportunity to say welcome. My name is Sari Atik. I am the rector here at St. John's, and we're really delighted to host this event. Sami Awad is a friend, and of course, we are 100% nonviolent in our approach to life and ministry, and even in our own ideas as a church about what the future is in Israel-Palestine. So we're delighted just to have this this topic surfaced and explored together here today. I hope that you know that you are welcome just the way you are tonight. And we don't expect you to have any particular religious perspective to be sitting and feeling fully welcome in this space. We do also ask that when it comes down to question time, that you just remember that we're all here, hopefully seeking the same thing, and a big part of it starts with the respect that we, with which we share our comments and our questions. And so, I always tell people, Sami, I'm sure you'll appreciate this. I tell people as a Palestinian that you get to walk out if you're not connected to this particular issue, as ethnically, you get to walk out and just forget about it. We have to live with it. So like your questions and comments, just be sensitive with them. Thank you so much. So who is doing this introduction? All right, welcome. Michael, thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'm Michael Beer. I'm co-director of Nonviolence International. It's great to see you here all tonight. I recognize many faces and people who have been doing this work for many, many decades. And we have a lot of experts in the room. And I think Sami's looking forward to dialoguing with you. Helen said something nice here to me just a moment. She goes, "Thanks for having this event tonight. I needed connection. I needed to get out away from the news and to come, of course, listening about more bad news from Palestine, but just needed to connect. And there's so many wonderful activists here and people here." Thank you, Tom. Tom is one of the folks that helped make this event happen. Thank you, Tom. Again, Nonviolence International wants to thank St. John's here. This is a Nonviolence International event. We threw it together very quickly and couldn't get formal approval from the vestry here in time to be fully sponsored by the St. John's, but we're very grateful for them and the tech folks getting the tech availability. We have 16 participants online already. Sami's going to speak for a while and then take question and answers. He does have a hard stop. He needs to be out of here by 8:30 because he's going to get up at 3 in the morning to do some work. So he needs his sleep. Sami, many of you know him. He grew up mostly in Kansas, but he's part of the Awad family, and his uncle here, Mubarak, who's one of my mentors, founded Nonviolence International in 1989 after having helped get the first intifada going in Israel. Sami got his bachelor's at Kansas, then went to American University for a master's degree, and he has an honorary doctorate from the Chicago Theological Seminary, and has been working in and living with his family and 3 daughters in Bethlehem since 1996, again, 97 or 95, I guess. And then you started Holy Land Trust in 97. And he directed and ran the Holy Land Trust for 25 years and stepped back and has now joined us as co-director of Nonviolence International. He's going back tomorrow to Bethlehem, and he's going to give us an update tonight, talk about the future of nonviolence in the region, and have a marvelous dialogue. So with that, hand off to Sami, and thank you all for coming tonight. I'll just say we do have a few books by Jonathan Katab, who is one of our co-founders and also related to Sami Mubarak. And you're welcome to take one of the books. We welcome a donation if you want to, but they're a very helpful book to educate people about the current situation and how we might move forward. Thank you much.
So, good evening, everyone. And really, thank you for coming out tonight. We almost changed our mind and watched the Zoom link that you told everybody to do that. Thank you, because you encourage people not to come. But thank you, Tom, for that. And I just want to say I'm really happy to be with you tonight. It feels like being amongst family, being here. Thank you, Sari, for the amazing work you do and for the legacy that you carry as well. It's so beautiful to reconnect with you, and thank you for the church and the opening of the space for us tonight. And of course, I want to welcome, I want to introduce our youngest person here, Naili. She is our intern, just joined us at Nonviolence International. And so we're very happy to have her with us. And thank you, Michael, for the partnership and the amazing work we do. And Mubarak and Nancy, my uncle and aunt, for Mubarak is the guy that I blame for everything I do. And Nancy they've always been so hospitable and caring for me and the family. So thank you as well. I feel like today I just want to share my heart with you. Yeah, just a little bit of my story and the process that I am going through. And I want to apologize if I'm not going to start or maybe end on a positive note. Usually, when I used to come to the US and speak, there was always this positive thing we would end with. The commitment to nonviolence, the work that we're going to do together, Israelis and Palestinians coming together in solidarity and activism, signs of hope. And I really just want to start by saying I don't know if I will end my conversation in this way. I want to be really honest with you because you are people who have been involved in this struggle and this conflict for many years, decades. You've been there. You've put your tears and blood in the support for the Palestinian people. And then to say I don't want to end with hope, maybe we will, but it doesn't mean to never to give up on the struggle that we are all part of. So as Michael said, I come from this amazing family that has been committed to peace work and nonviolence since 1948. My grandmother Huda, the mother of Mubarak, when she lost her husband in 1948 in the war, when he was shot, and they buried the husband, the father figure in the courtyard of the house, always insisted that as a family, we will never seek revenge and retaliation for what happened to us. That her faith, our faith calls us not to do that. But also, she always insisted that we should always try to seek peace and reconciliation with those who did this to us as well. That not taking revenge and retaliation doesn't mean not to resist. Not taking revenge and retaliation doesn't mean to run away. It means to also proactively seek peace with those who did this to us as a family. That's the seed that she planted in the family many years ago. It's the seed her children planted in us as grandchildren as well. Growing up, I grew up under occupation. I grew up after 1967, living daily with what the occupation does to us as Palestinians. I grew up seeing and witnessing soldiers and settlers and the brutality and the violence that they imposed against us as Palestinians. It wasn't easy, and as a child, I was struggling with it. How can we make peace with them and look what they're doing to us? Questions that I asked 40 years ago, and seems that we continue to ask these questions today, even in a much more profound way. But it was because of my uncle Mubarak that I began to see that there is something that I can do. which is to engage in nonviolent resistance and activism. And the first demonstration I joined was when I was 12 years old with my uncle, when he invited me to get on the back of his red motorcycle. I think he was the only Palestinian who had a red motorcycle at that time, and to join him in planting trees in a land that was threatened to be confiscated by settlers. And I went there and we planted trees, and it was very empowering. And for me, it was the first time I met Israelis who were also committed to nonviolence and peace with Palestinians. And that really put me on the trajectory. This is what I want to do. And that became more enforced in me when my uncle was arrested in the first Intifada in 1988, was put on trial, and was deported because of his work in nonviolence. That was a shock for me as a 16-year-old to see this uncle that I love so much being arrested, being tied up in chains, taken and dragged in and out of courts, but also seeing so many people outside the prison and the court protest against his arrest in solidarity with him. And his deportation made me begin to ask the question, what is the power of nonviolence that would make the Israeli government treat my uncle, a peace activist, a nonviolent activist, in such a way? And that is when I committed fully my life to trying to answer that question. I'm not going to go into the details of the organization that I started, Whole Land Trust, but our commitment was to nonviolent resistance and activism. We became one of the leading organizations in this field following the teachings of Mubarak, my uncle. Protests, demonstrations, boycott campaigns, different things that we did. And again, it was very encouraging, very empowering, the things that we were doing at that time, especially with the beginning of the second Intifada, where there were Palestinians who felt that armed resistance was a way to move forward. We insisted with many others that we still commit to nonviolent resistance and activism. And we disagreed with them. And many of them did not like us for what we were doing, but that was our commitment. As part of the journey, which I think is a very, very important point to look into, is that one of the things I began to understand and realize, it came out of asking the question, why haven't we achieved peace yet in this land? We had 7 years of the Oslo peace process. Negotiations were taking place continuously. Millions, if not billions of dollars were thrown in and funding peace initiatives between Palestinians and Israelis, building the Palestinian Authority that was going to become the Palestinian state. All of these things were in place, and we never became a state. What was behind it all? And yes, we could talk about one side negotiating and the other side not wanting to negotiate. We could tactically blame the Palestinians for messing up or the Israelis for messing up. But I began to realize that there is something much more at the core of it that was preventing this peace from happening. And that realization came to me when I was invited to go to the death camps of Auschwitz and Birkenau. In the early 2000s, I went there on a pilgrimage. It was called the Bearing Witness Retreat. And over there, I discovered what this situation, this conflict is all about. How deeply embedded in fear and trauma we are, both as Palestinians and Israelis. The inherited trauma of the Holocaust that has been reinforced generation after generation within that Jewish mindset. And of course, us as Palestinians, the Nakba that started in 1948, the ethnic cleansing that started before 1948 and continues and continues and continues. And so even negotiating peace, people were negotiating from a place of fear of the other. How can you make peace with somebody that you learn to be afraid of, even if they're not a threat to you? You just learn to be afraid of. In Auschwitz, I heard Israeli teachers tell Palestinian children, Israeli teachers telling Israeli children, 13, 14-year-old children, if the Palestinians have an opportunity, they'll do to you what the Nazis did to our ancestors. Imagine a 14-year-old child being told, Sami, Osama, Mubarak, Sari. These are potential, not just terrorists, not just Islamists, Nazi soldiers that will kill you, that will destroy you if they have an opportunity. And I say this point because I really want to come back to it in a bit as well. And at that point, I realized that this peace cannot happen without us addressing the collective trauma of our communities. And we began to engage and do different projects to achieve some level of understanding, at least, of the trauma. Maybe not healing it, but to understand that we're motivated by fear in how we relate to each other. And again, we were rejected by many people when we started talking about this, because the question is, how dare you talk about healing the person who is abusing you? Isn't it right? Usually the healing is for those who are abused. And nobody talks about healing. You know, you have justice towards those. You have to punish those who are abusing you. But for us, it really felt very important that we need to bring this healing to both of our communities in order to create some space where we could find a path to live together. All of this was happening. We were moving forward. We had our ups and downs. We had our challenges, but we still continued in creating these joint spaces. Some were for nonviolent resistance and activism, and some spaces were created for this joint healing work. And then October 7th came. October 7th, to us living in that region, maybe even for you as well, they say those incidences where you remember exactly where you were when it happened, 9/11 or JFK assassination, or you remember exactly where you were. And I remember where I was on that day. I was actually going with my ex-wife to a market to buy vegetables. And the first thing when we started getting the news, because nobody knew exactly what was happening, we just heard, we saw the rockets fly over Bethlehem. We saw kids cheering in the streets. The rockets were flying over us. Some were landing not far from where we were. And then we started hearing news of Palestinians in Gaza, led by Hamas, coming into 1948 territory. And what is Israel? And while, I'm going to be very honest here, while there were Palestinians who were joyful at this, because in a sense, this living in prison, in this concentration camp for all of these years was challenged. And not finally challenged, it was challenged again. Because a few years before that, we had the Freedom March, the March of Return, where Palestinians did engage in trying to break the siege of Gaza and return to their homes. And they were violently responded to by the Israeli military in mostly nonviolent actions led by Palestinians. And so remembering that story, the first thing I did was picked up the phone and called my cousin in Gaza. That's where my mother's family is from. I have an uncle and aunt, two cousins, and the husband to one of the cousins that lives in Gaza. And I called Ramzi up and I said, Ramzi, find a way to get out. Find a way to get out from Gaza. This is going to be an absolute disaster. Of course, there was no way for them to get out from Gaza. The bombs were immediately thrown on the Gaza Strip from the Israeli army, even with the willingness to kill Israelis, to continue to bomb Gaza, as we know very well from the reports that we had. Immediately after that, we went into the space of just trying to figure out what is happening and how can we deal with it. And I want to specifically go back to that point of trauma, because one of the things that happened on October 7th that again reinforced the narrative of this existential fear, existential threat within the Jewish community was Netanyahu and the Israeli government and Israeli leaders coming out, comparing what happened on October 7th to the Holocaust, calling it the Holocaust, some even calling it worse than the Holocaust. And in that mindset of trauma, that is so existing within the Jewish community, as soon as they heard this, blank. Now it's about response. It is about, in Arabic we say, burning everything down. It doesn't matter. Collateral damage is not even an issue. We do it, we destroy. And this is something that happens in that mindset. That mindset where it thinks its existence is completely threatened, even though we know it's not. That immediate response was, we will destroy everything in Gaza. And this is exactly what we have seen happen every single day since October 7th. You've seen the reports, you follow the news. I'm not going to go into the numbers and statistics of Gaza. I'll just share on the level of the family, that the family, including my uncle who's 88 years old, my aunt who is blind and deaf, they had to move to 3 different refugee camps in Gaza because the bombing was falling on Gaza City where they lived. And we were able to get them out from Gaza a week before the Israelis took over the Rafah crossing. And since then, nobody has been able to get out. And sadly, we had to raise money to pay for each one of them. So there's 5 of them. We had to pay $6,000 for each one of them to get them out, which is a cost that is high, but it's worth every penny to save them from the situation, knowing that tens and the numbers will be over 100,000 Palestinians have lost their lives there, and 95% are refugees and displaced. The situation in Gaza is a disaster. And it is sad that we in this modern time are a living witness to a campaign of eradication and ethnic cleansing of an entire population. And I know many of you are struggling, like many of us. What can we do? What can we do? Every day we ask ourselves this question, what can we do? And you're out demonstrating, and you're out protesting and writing letters and trying to work in the evilness of the heart of the empire here. And we haven't been able to stop the genocide at all from taking place. And it's terrible to see how global leaders have responded to the situation in Gaza. Recently, as we know, there has been a ceasefire that was reached, an agreement to a ceasefire that included exchange of prisoners. And then I have to say, for many of us, it's a mixed feeling. There's the feeling of joy that at least the people in Gaza will have a breath, that at least the people in Gaza will be able to recoup some of what's lost, at least go visit and see their homes and maybe salvage some things from their destroyed homes, be able to have some food, some water, something to drink, a day without bombing. But at the same time, I think most of us understand that the heart to move beyond the ceasefire doesn't exist, at least within this Israeli establishment. That this heart is filled with bitterness and hate and will return to destroy Gaza when the opportunity comes. And many of us think it's just about how many Israelis need to be released that can give Netanyahu enough leverage to stay and maintain his government before he's able to go back. And so one of our biggest fears is what is the next level of attacks and destruction that will happen in Gaza. At the same time that the ceasefire was declared, there was something that many of us had been saying all along the way, is that the moment they slow down or stop or are forced to stop in Gaza, they're going to open the fronts in the West Bank. And this is exactly what we saw on the day the ceasefire was declared. It was on a Sunday. Sunday night at 3 a.m., I woke up to sounds of bangs in Beit Jala, where I live, around my house. And many people, and we're all texting each other, trying to figure out what is it, what is happening. Settlers attacking, army attacking. We knew it was coming. I mean, and you know very well that the attacks did not stop throughout the time of the war on Gaza, but it was going to be this intentional shift of more army and more soldiers into Gaza. And part of it was this agreement that, again, to allow this Israeli coalition government to maintain itself, is always, what are you negotiating? What are you giving to the settlers in order to move forward in one way or the other? And the settlers, as we know very well, were given the green light to continue their violent attacks on Palestinians, again, in unprecedented levels. Trump comes in, he takes off the restrictions, or the what's the word? The sanctions, thank you, over the settlers and settler organizations. And these individual settlers, who were actually heroes with the sanctions, became even more heroes after the sanctions was released from them. And so now we are seeing tremendous violence by the settlers. The sounds that we were hearing were the sounds of the gates that were being put on all roads in and out of Bethlehem. Just this week, close to 900 gates and roads were blocked by the Israeli military, cutting completely Palestinian areas from each other. And it's not even about now area A and C, as you know, these areas where the settlement, no, it's area A and A. Palestinian communities next to each other have been gated, and roads have been blocked. In addition to more land confiscation, more commitment by the Israeli government to build more settlements, and the violence by the settlers. And the most recent thing is the annexation of the Jordan Valley. This is the bread basket of the Palestinians. This is where the water resources is. This is where the fruits and vegetables that come to the Palestinians exist. This is now going to be completely annexed. It's a third of the West Bank, completely annexed. That means it falls under the Israeli government civil system, not the military system, which settlers used to have to deal with at some point. The challenges that we have now with the settlers, in addition to them being very violent, and they feel they have really a green light to do whatever they want without restrictions. Probably many of you have followed the case of Al-Makhrur in Beit Jala, a Palestinian Christian family that is actually Israeli citizens, and they have deeds to the land, Israeli deeds to the land itself. Settlers came over and took over that land. And they kicked the family out of it. And the family, every time they try to go into the land, every time they call, as Israeli citizens, they call the police come, harass the Palestinians, and kick them out again. And more recently, the settlers destroyed all the trees on this land, in case, if a court ruling happens where they might have to leave, they want to make sure that the family has nothing left on this land. This is the level of violence that we're seeing from these settlers. And near that land, there was a restaurant, a very beautiful restaurant, that just in the last 2 days, they completely destroyed as well. A restaurant of terraces by a Palestinian family. The challenge also with settlers is that in the past, again, before October 7th, a few years back, there was kind of a differentiation between settlers and soldiers. Historically, within Israel, soldiers were the ones who were more connected to the Labor Party, the leftist party. They're not religious. They're kind of the kibbutzniks. This is kind of the pocket of what the kibbutzniks had. The leftists was the army. In the last 15 years, there has been a big shift where the right wing has infiltrated the army itself. In the last 5 years, It is settlers who have infiltrated the army itself. And so now one of the big challenges that exists is that you cannot actually differentiate between Israeli soldiers who technically are supposed to kind of keep a space of protection, even though they harass the Palestinians, they stand with the settlers. But at one point they would tell the settlers, you've done enough damage, you could leave now. Now we cannot tell the difference between them. And there have been incidences where, and then there was an incident reported in the southern Hebron Hills where settlers were harassing a family in Masafer Yatta, in the southern Hebron Hill area that you probably hear a lot about with all the violence. The families called the army. That's the only resource they have for protection. The settlers left. The families thought, because they called the army and threatened that the army is coming, that this is why the settlers left. Not even 10, 15 minutes later, an army jeep did come. And guess what? It was the settlers in army uniform that were there. So the same settlers that harassed the family came as army and harassed the family again. This is just an example of the many, many challenges that Palestinians are facing now from the settlers. So there is a lot of violence. There is a lot of fear that is happening. Palestinians are really living every day in terror from the Israeli government, Israeli military, and the settlers. Every day we are hearing news of cars being stopped at checkpoints. It used to be an hour, it used to be 2 hours, it used to be 4 hours. Now it's 8 hours, 10 hours, 24 hours, where Palestinians are not able to move between one area or the other, even if they're allowed to by soldiers. And the soldiers just sit back, take their time, and decide if they want or not. For me to even come here, from crossing from Jericho to the Jordan River, what would take you half an hour took me, just that one crossing, 8 hours to do. And I actually had the VIP pass to paid extra money to get like a special treatment, and that took me 8 hours. There are people that are there waiting 24 hours just to cross into Jordan to leave. So we're very, very worried. The situation is deteriorating very quickly in the West Bank. And as I said before, the situation in Gaza will continue to become worse. One of the things that we are trying to engage in and to push for as Nonviolence International, working with many, many organizations, in addition to the work that you continue to do, and we want you to continue to do it more and more, because that ceasefire can be also a distraction where for many people they say, yeah, we did it. We reached the goal. Now we could go back to our lives. No, we want this to continue. But one thing that we want to start pushing more and more is for you and others to start coming to the land, to come and visit, to come and be in solidarity, to come and connect with the people. And I know many of you have done this. I don't know how many times, Tom, countless times. You've been there, but we want to encourage more and more people to come there. And the invitation is to come on different levels. If you just come as tourists, come to people to visit, to connect with the Palestinians, to see them, to visit them in where they are. It's like really visiting people in prison, which you do here, to come and visit the prisoners in Palestine and to see them and be in solidarity with them and just to pray with them and be present for them. But then that can also be a presence where it moves beyond just visiting to being in solidarity with Palestinians, to be protective presence for Palestinians in these areas that are being threatened. If there is any sign of hope that we still have, and there are probably many more, but one thing that we still attach ourselves to is that internationals, especially Americans, that come into areas where settlers and soldiers are attacking, have an influence to lessen the level of violence, if not stop the violence of these settlers and soldiers towards the Palestinians. And one thing, we have been meeting with people on the Hill, meeting with different organizations, which is how can we encourage Americans especially, but people from around the world to come in what's called unarmed civilian protection of the Palestinians, UCP. And there are many, many organizations. Sabil was one of the leading organizations in this work many years ago, the Ecumenical Accompaniment Program that maybe some of you have joined or know very well about. There are actually 20 different organizations that are doing this work. And we want to encourage this. We feel this is a big, important sign of hope, and especially at this time, because we feel also that there is a leverage that the Americans can have in this issue, which is that there was an agreement reached by the United States and Israel for visa waiver. You probably heard about it. And so Americans are supposed to be able to go into Israel without any restrictions as Americans, because the US said Israelis can't come to the US also without applying for visas, without restrictions. And so we want to take advantage of that. And we want to see if the Israelis are really able to commit to this commitment of reciprocity with visas. And we expect that they will not. And we expect that they will not, and that would allow us here to create a legal precedent to move forward in response to the Israelis not allowing Americans to receive the visas. If we can get even at that level, the US government to say, we will stop Israelis from coming to the US because of this issue, which is a technical legal issue, then it is a success for us. So this is something that we are working on, and we want to be in contact with you and encourage you to see how we could brainstorm around this together. A few years ago, we did a campaign which was called Visit Palestine. I don't know if many of you followed it or not, but it was a campaign where we encouraged people from around the world to buy tickets and come to Tel Aviv airport. And when they were going to be asked by the passport controller, what are you doing here? Visit Palestine. That's the answer they had. And it could have been very simple. The Israeli government could have just turned an eye on it and just allowed all of this to happen. They freaked out. It scared them. I mean, this powerhouse that we think is so strong, something as small as this made them stop people from getting on airplanes in France, in Italy, in England. People who had nothing to do with anything being in solidarity with the Palestinians were rejected flights in Paris because the Mossad was in these areas and they were just suspicious of different people that, oh, this person might be coming in this Visit Palestine thing and might be coming to be in solidarity with the Palestinians. And so sometimes we creatively thinking, it's not the big things that we do, it's sometimes small little things. It's like David and Goliath. It doesn't take sometimes much to try to bring that empire down. And I think this is part of the strategies that we are looking into. This said, I will conclude by saying our commitment to resistance continues. Our steadfastness, our resiliency is resistance, as you know very well. And this is something that we as Palestinians are proud of, that we are able to deal on a daily basis with this oppressive system that we have. It's bringing us together more. It's making us also as Palestinians look into our own issues, our own questions, our own leadership, and how our leadership has failed us as well. And we're asking many questions on this regard. So there's like a renaissance of Palestinian thinking that is beginning to emerge within the Palestinian community, especially within the young generation, and especially also with women within the Palestinian community who had been sidelined by the Palestinian Authority for many years. Their voice is beginning to come out again. So our steadfastness is there. The steadfastness of people in Gaza is there. I know that many Gazans who left Gaza can't wait to get back to Gaza as well, because that is going to be the port for them to go back to their homes where they came from originally. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Sami. So we're going to open it up to Q&A now.
And it's not just questions. If you have solutions, I'm open to listening as well.
Thank you so much for your talk. In the summer of 2023, I had the experience of going to visit Palestine with an annual Quaker service learning, and we were based in the Ramallah Friends School. And so I can just really encourage anybody who hasn't had a chance to do that. I'm also thinking about people who likely aren't going to have that chance. And so I would be interested in your thoughts on the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign. And specifically in the US, the American Friends Service Committee has convened what's called the Apartheid Free Communities Network, where congregations, so it's an interfaith network of mosques, Jewish congregations, and various Christian congregations and solidarity groups. And that seems like something where people can, whole congregations can have the kind of dialogue to even decide to join that. And then there are ways to collaborate with that network to find out what people can do together in an interfaith way. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts about those additional
Definitely.
things that people can do here, if you see value in those things.
Definitely. Without a doubt, the boycott, divestment campaigns that are taking place are growing in the United States. It was beautiful when I was visiting family in Kansas. My nephews, young nephews and nieces were telling me which are the restaurants they eat to and which are the restaurants they boycott because of the situation there. So that momentum is very, very important. And always understand, the greater response you get from the US government and Israel towards these things, it means that this stuff is working. So all of the laws they're trying to pass in different states about not boycotting Israel and getting funds cut if you do that, this only shows success. And so as I was saying, that power that we're seeing in its brutality can also be so fragile as it stands on it. And I love Tom Getman, like he keeps reminding us of South Africa and what happened in South Africa and apartheid in the moments of great strength of the apartheid, when people in South Africa thought this will never end. The whole system collapsed. And it took a big part of it, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaigns that were happening globally to assist that collapse of that system. And so continue to do this work. And stand in solidarity with each other, support each other, the young generation, find ways to support them, to encourage them, to continue to do the protests on campuses, wherever they're doing it, join them, and let them. You're the elders of the movement in a way. You need to be a shining light and leadership to them. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your talk. And I'm interested in your impression of what has changed on the Israeli side. I think I'm not going to say it's more important than what happens here, but frankly, if there aren't more people who are doing what those people do, come to the Gaza border and drive people to hospitals and so on, if there isn't a change over there, you're going to have a really steep uphill struggle.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really good question. And again, I'm in a conversation where it's all about honesty with you tonight. One of the big struggles that we had within what I would call the peace community or the peace movement after October 7th was to see how many Israeli activists that were engaged in nonviolent resistance or dialogue circles or work very quickly went into that narrative of this existential fear, and we need to protect ourselves. And it was heartbreaking. It was really, really heartbreaking to the point where we were begging them, what your government is going to do, what they're doing is a disaster, it's genocide. No, don't use this language. No, we have to get rid of Hamas and then everything will be fine. We have to protect ourselves. Even people who were committed to nonviolence and peace work were using that language of violence in order for us to be able to move forward. We have to now destroy Hamas, and justifying in a way, directly or not, the killing of thousands of Palestinians early on. So for us, it's been a very, very big struggle in how can we reconnect with Israelis on this level. And this said, there are many, many Israelis that understood what was happening, understood the tragedy that was being created, and their positions became even stronger in support of justice for the Palestinians. So that we had both sides, but I would say the great majority of those who were engaging in peace work, we began to understand that, again, that mindset, they were engaging in peace work because they were afraid of us, not because they understood justice was a need, not because they understood liberation was a goal for the Palestinians. Let us, sit together and let's dialogue and let's get to know each other, and we eat hummus together and be friends together, and we'll find a way to deal with the issues. That was the mindset of many, many Israelis. The hardcore activists remain hardcore activists, and they still stay strong. As far as the Israeli general public is concerned, I haven't seen statistics recently, but one of the big challenges that we had when you saw a lot of the people that were protesting in Israel, they were not necessarily protesting against the war. They were not protesting to stop the war and the fighting. They were protesting against Netanyahu's strategy of how he was conducting the war. That they were saying, let us negotiate a deal to get people out, but then do whatever you want. So I think the last statistic I saw was 80 to 85% of Israelis still support violence towards Gaza. You had a point on that? Yeah.
I would like to know what little cracks in the wall you see. Is there a community of, say, psychiatrists or trauma specialists within Israeli society? Where are Zachot always talks about looking for the cracks in the wall. And it's so nice just to sit with you because you have such a sense of wellness about you in spite of it all. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'll just link the two together. Just to say that the sad reality is that the great majority of Israelis have gone more into this right-wing mindset of the us and the them, and the sense that no matter what the cost, we need to protect ourselves, and complete breakdown of relationships with Palestinians. And regarding the issue of the cracks, one of the sad, again, I'm trying to find something optimistic here. Many Israelis who are committed to peace and justice have left the land. And they left the land not because of not just because of how Palestinians are being treated, but because of how they are being treated as well. I know Israeli dear friends of mine that have been threatened, that have been attacked. An Israeli friend who has a farm, the neighbors keep destroying the farm, calling the police to raid the farm. They've labeled him as a leftist, anarchist, Palestinian sympathizer. He's not able to sell products from his farm, and he's in a place where he doesn't know what to do. And so and we need to bring it back to this notion that, again, before October 7th happened, if you remember very well, there were protests and demonstrations happening in Israel because they were beginning to feel and sense that Israel is moving into a fascist system, something that we've said all along. They were beginning to say. And many of us, question Netanyahu and his approach to how he dealt with the Gaza situation. Was it really about the hostages or keeping himself in power so that he doesn't go on trial because of his corruption and his approach? But fascism was growing within Israeli society for Israelis themselves. And now that fascism has accelerated towards the Israeli peace activists and justice activists. The cracks in the walls. Yes, there's a lot of trauma conversations that are happening with Israelis. And there's a lot of movement also. What I'm encouraged is Palestinians from around the world who are specialists in the field of trauma and psychiatry are beginning to come together to talk together. We're developing with them different programs, different ideas of how can we get trauma relief for the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank at a certain point. Another sign of hope is that there are those Israelis that went into that far right or fearful mindset that have kind of come back and apologized for that and said that we got drawn by the wave of fear of our government. I've had Israelis call me crying, apologizing for positions that they've done. But for us, we're saying but now it's not about coming and eating hummus in my house again. We need some serious work to happen within Israeli society. As Palestinians, we have our work to do as well within our society. So I think a big part of the movement that we're looking into now is not just to come together. It is what is the work you need to do within your community? What is the work we need to do within our community? And at the right time, we will come together. But we cannot come together the way we used to. This is something that I personally cannot do. My house was open to Israelis before October 7th. I cannot do that anymore. I need Israelis to work in their society to create that mindset of ending occupation and liberation and equal rights for the Palestinians. And we need to engage in our resistance and resiliency activities. And then we see when is the right time for us to come together.
Just want to encourage people in the Zoom land to drop questions into the chat, and we'll take a question there in a moment. But first, Mubarak.
He always asks a hard question. I just want to say this. It's like testing.
Sami, you have been living there for a long period of time. Why the Palestinians are not afraid of the Israelis? And why Israelis are so much afraid of the Palestinian?
Well, I wouldn't say we're not afraid. I think we have stronger resiliency and stronger ability to withstand and to handle and to address the challenges that we face from them. There are Palestinians that are afraid, but we also believe. We have a mission that we believe in. I mean, we are connected to the land. We consider ourselves the indigenous people of the land. And this is something that is from generation to generation, that we protect ourselves, we protect our communities, and we protect the land itself. And so we don't have the level of this existential fear, I think, that Israelis have, which is a farce. It's a narrative that they've learned. We have the commitment and the willpower to stay in the land and to fight and to be resilient in this land. And I think it connects to our religions, it connects to our faith, it connects to our tradition, it connects to our culture. And as I said, it connects to us, our connection to the land itself. The love that people have to the land is something that, sorry to say this here, colonialists will never be able to get, will never be able to understand. And I think this is a very powerful notion of we will stay in this land. I'll give one very quick example because of time. Many years ago, I was guiding a group of journalists in the Haitian refugee camp. And they were asking different people many questions. And at one point, there was a woman sitting on the side of her house and with dough making bread and putting it on fire to make taboon bread. And one of the journalists, I think he was trying to be a smart in church. Was that like, ask her, what does she think of the occupation? And I asked her in Arabic, what do you think of the occupation? Without blinking an eye, without shifting any of her emotions, she said, listen, my son, the Turks were here and they left. The Jordanians were here and they left. Or the British were here and they left. The Israelis, the Jordanians were here and they left. And the Zionists are here and they will leave. And we're going to stay. That was her answer. And she really got him. I mean, if we look into just Israeli society, that fear that you're talking about, the estimates that 400 to 500,000 Israelis have left completely. the land. I have people that I know that are buying property in Spain, in France, and Portugal. They're done. Because again, that mindset is that this is not about belonging to the land. It was a project that happened, and they were part of it. But now they began to see this project is failing. And so they're trying to find their livelihood in other places as well. Oh, sorry.
We have a question on Zoom, and then we'll come back to the parish hall. From David Harbaugh, given the increasing terrible level of violence against the Palestinian people, how strong is the commitment of the Palestinian people to continuing their nonviolent struggle to resist the Israeli aggression and violence?
Yeah, that's only David would ask this question. Hi, David. We need to, and again, in all honesty, we need to continue to push for the Palestinian nonviolent resistance movement. The Palestinians now are more in a survival mode. And the survival mode for us is resiliency and steadfastness, which for us is a key of nonviolent resistance as well. But to say now, to engage in nonviolence now, it is very, very difficult. And this is something that we're struggling with. Again, in the past, before October 7th, when we organized demonstrations and protests, there was a little bit of that space of engagement with the soldiers, maybe a little bit with the settlers. Tear gas would be shot at us, rubber bullets. A few of us would be arrested. The media would come. Now we can't even organize anything. And one thing that we understand is that for the Israeli establishment, the military establishment, and the government, it is not about Palestinians choosing nonviolence, which will be accepted, and armed resistance, which will be rejected. Resistance is rejected. Any form of resistance is rejected at this moment. And this is the response that we're seeing from the Israeli government and military. This is why we are encouraging this international presence to be there with the Palestinians who are engaging in the resistance activities, who are sitting there in solidarity with the Palestinians, reporting, documenting, and disseminating information on what is happening. And so for the Palestinian nonviolence resistance to regrow again and reestablish itself again, we need that support of that international community. And I would say back to that point of Israeli activists as well, who many of them, again, are coming and start standing in solidarity with the Palestinians in these situations, are getting beaten up by settlers and soldiers like never before.
Thanks. We have one more question from Zoom, then we'll come back to the hall. From Claudette Herring, have you a current sense that there are a few coming to the fore who have the possibility of formalized leadership for the future of Palestine?
So what's the question, Doug?
Who are there Palestinians leaders coming up?
Yeah, this is something that we are committed to and we have been working on. And we feel that one of the big things that I'm actually proud to say is that most Palestinians have reached the point of being absolutely tired of our current leadership. They might not say it publicly, but people privately understand that our leadership has not achieved anything for us. Promises for decades have failed. If it doesn't matter who the leadership is, on what political party, where we are now, at the end of the day, is a failure of our leadership. We cannot just sit back and blame Israel for everything, blame the US for everything. Our leadership needs to take responsibility. And many people in Palestine are questioning and are challenging that leadership. And I think that is the sign of a new emerging leadership that will come from a younger generation. One of the things that I'm organizing when I go back home is a meeting with Palestinians. And then the idea that we're working on now, it's not just about Palestinians from the West Bank coming together. It is Palestinians in the land coming together, bringing that young generation together that has been divided for many, many years. Because there are the Palestinians that have the Israeli citizenship, the Palestinians that have the Jerusalem ID, the Palestinians that have the West Bank ID. And that divide and conquer mindset has succeeded, has worked, dividing us from each other. And so we're going to start having meetings of Palestinians coming together under the banner of "We are one nation, we are one people" coming together. And what is the strategy? What is the culture? What is the connections? What are the activities that we as Palestinians are going to do together? Because it's not just about the West Bank and Gaza. It is East Jerusalem that, as we know very well, is being destroyed. It is the Palestinians in 1948 territory that are living fear as well. I was sharing the other day an example of a friend of mine who is a lawyer, a Palestinian lawyer from Haifa. She has been on trial within the bar union of Israel because she posted one post on October 8th, and the post was Sabah al-Khair Gaza. Good morning, Gaza. And since then, a year and a half, she hasn't been able to work. She is going to hearing after hearing after hearing about, and Israeli lawyers are trying to disbar her for this. So there are many, many Palestinians in Israel who are also experiencing their own form of discrimination.
Sami, thank you. Thank you for being here. Today, Rashid Halidi, who is the inheritor of Edward Said's post at Columbia, said to Peter Beinart, a Jewish scholar also at Columbia, that it now has to be the Jews in America to stand up and be counted and take risk. And Peter was talking about how he's being threatened and other Jewish people are being threatened.
Yeah.
So to your point, we are finding that it's the Jewish people now who are setting the record straight because the people in Israel don't get the news, or they get it, but they get it interpreted in a way that's propagandistic. And our experience at St. Mark's Church in supporting the Gaza family that we're supporting, the biggest donor is a Jewish donor. He's a psychiatrist who's spoken in this hall.
Mm-hmm.
And it is amazing to us to see the emergence here and the risk-taking here. Halidi said today that historically, the only way liberation comes for people who are oppressed is violence, diplomacy, and most of all, nonviolent activity. Gandhi is remembered in India, not the fact that the British killed 200,000 people.
Yeah.
And so I just wonder if you have had, in your time here this week, encounters with Jewish people that are willing to take the risks that people like Peter Beinart and our doctor friend are taking.
Definitely, definitely. Again, I fully agree with that point. One of the films that I was in and I'm proud to have been part of is the film called Israelism. I don't know if people have seen it. And that film has been such a big trigger for groups like AIPAC, Zionist, right-wing American Jews, Israel itself, banned in different university campuses and places from being shown. And so, again, that fragile system of power begins to collapse even with the smallest thing. So having these young Jews begin to say no and become anti-Zionist and declaring it as anti-Zionist and fighting for the rights of the Palestinians and disconnecting themselves from the Jewish state that declares itself as the one that's going to protect them has been amazing momentum. And we have, of course, different organizations like the Center for Jewish Nonviolence, which many of you probably know that we work with at Nonviolence International. We support them, we encourage them, we encourage people to join their work. And so there is this growing momentum within the Jewish community in the US, within the youth community. And I would add to this, because we're talking religion, I want to add that within even the historic power of the Christian Zionist community here, the fact that we're also seeing that notion being challenged by a younger generation as well. And so there are many young Christians in the United States that are awakening and beginning to say no, and we're not going to buy these theological lies anymore that our salvation or whatever it is depends on us giving this blind full support for Israel. So in the long term, the precedent has been set that we cannot go back to what was. And this is, I think, one of the key points of October 7th, is that Christian Zionism by itself has been redefined and relabeled since October 7th. Genocide is now linked to that word. Ethnic cleansing is now linked to this word. War is linked to this word. Human rights violations is linked to this word. There is no going back to what was. So there's a new momentum that is moving in these new definitions of terms that they cannot go back to. It's done. They cannot retract what has happened, and things will continue to unfold as well. Time will continue to unfold more and more of the atrocities that happened in Gaza, and the world will continue to hear about these atrocities as the years will come.
Control forever. That's what
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I was also listening to Rashidi, and what I see in Rashidi, as well as with Miko Peled. I wanted to bring up Miko Peled from last night, because what I'm beginning to see, and I'm interested in how you see it as a Palestinian, but what I'm seeing is a new vision. I mean, it's shocking. I mean, it's like if you were living thousands of years ago, this is what Jeremiah would have sounded like. You know what I mean? It really wakes you up. But the vision of it was a matter of what is Palestine, with the Israelis here too, you know, with the, and how it will look, and what will it, you know, what will it take? So I'd be very interested in seeing, when you were on that panel, listening to him, what your response was, and how, you know, how do we continue from that point, from his vision of a really united Palestine, calling it Palestine. And that was really very shocking.
Yeah, I think Miko, there are things Miko says that only Miko can say, and I love him for that. And to be honest, there are these kind of things that Israelis can say, that Jews can say, and they get attacked. And I honor him for the life that he lives and the challenges that he gets all the time. But I love his commitment to the vision and to the work that he does. And for me, I would say at the end of the day, on the political level, the solutions that have been offered thus far have all failed. And there are 23 different solutions out there, by the way. It's not just like the two states. There are 23 different solutions. And I think one thing that I try to look into is not to engage in the debate about the solutions, because I feel that the whole Oslo process was a big distraction for all of us to engage in this debate about what the solution should be like, while that cancer was doing its work on the land, settlers and settlements growing, and land being confiscated, and walls being built, and checkpoints being put, and people are debating, well, what is the solution? What is the solution? And so for me, at the end of the day, what we are advocating for, what all of us are advocating for, is the full recognition of the equal rights of all the people in this land, justice, equality, and rights for all the people, no matter who they are, what their religion is, what their ethnicity is, what their gender is, however they identify themselves. This is the foundation that needs to happen. Once we have a foundation that says we recognize the equal rights of all the people to this land, including the right of return, because if they have the right of return, Palestinians should have the right of return as well, then we could say, now, how do we frame this? The example I give sometimes is, imagine like a painting like the Mona Lisa. Now, there are two components of the painting: the canvas itself, where the painting exists, and the frame. I don't know if you've seen the frame of the Mona Lisa. Google it, it's amazing. Just the frame itself. The problem is, for the last 35 years, we've been fighting and debating over the frame. It's a framework, you know, we call the framework for peace. What is supposed to hold it together? And so is it a plastic frame? Is it a wooden frame? Is it a frameless frame, the non-state solution? Is it a thick frame? What color should the frame be? Who is painting the picture? What does the painting look like? This has been missing. And I think the movement that we need to begin to emerge now is what is that picture? What is that image of the Holy Land that is so dear to all our hearts? When you close your eyes and imagine the Holy Land, we all imagine the same thing, by the way, right? Pretty much, we all imagine. Are there walls in your imagination? Are there checkpoints? Soldiers? Army? No. It's all these tribes, all these people living together. And so this is my intention. Work on that, on the foundation. And then we could say, okay, now what is the most beautiful frame to put that picture together is? It could be then a two-state solution, actually. It could be a seven-state solution, according to some Dutch guy who wrote a book this thick called The Seven-State Solution. It could be a one-state solution then, but nobody's afraid of each other because we recognize each other. A two-state is celebrating diversity instead of creating separation between us. And so my encouragement is not to fall into the trap of the politics, but to say, yes, we fight for the equal rights of all the people in this land.
Hello. My name is Mark Harrison. On the question of visa reciprocity, please understand, if I go and then I leave, and most of those people in the room, we stand in one line to leave, but Palestinian Americans stand in another line. All right? And that was not reciprocity. The second thing is, have you ever thought or looked at why did white South African Jews, why were they more strong against apartheid in South Africa versus Jews in Israel? And what kind of discussion that they should take place? Then,
That's for you, Tom.
yes. Then the thing of, someone suggested or said that the PA is killing as many Palestinians as Israel on the West Bank. Is that a true statement or not? What do you know about that? And I will end at, we as faith people, we have investments. Some of us have pulled out of those companies. Some of us need to go back and look at Caterpillar. Yeah, and because I suggested that to you the other day. And then we who live here in Maryland, we have Van Hollen is pretty good, but we need to go back to Ossebrooks. And is Ossebrooks going to follow Van Hollen? That's what we need to at least fight for. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to? All right. So the question, I'm gonna pick a question. The third question you asked was about the Palestinian Authority. I want to give some leverage to the Palestinian Authority by saying that that leadership, whether intentionally or not, has put itself between a rock and a hard place. So to answer the question is no, they haven't killed as many Palestinians as the Israelis have. But they are in a situation where even the people that have the best intention within the Palestinian Authority don't know what a non-Palestinian authority or the dismantlement or the collapse of the Palestinian Authority would look like and what it can create. And so there are many people within the Palestinian Authority that are really afraid of what can exist without that entity, because it has been the entity that has created some sense of continuity for the Palestinian people for the years. It hasn't achieved the goal of liberation, as I said, and I think leaders need to pay the price for that. But it's easy for me to say as a Palestinian, let the Palestinian Authority be dismantled and we'll deal with whatever comes. But there are people that their livelihood depends on this. There are people that security depends on this, just the personal security. And so the Palestinian Authority is really in this situation where it is struggling. There are people that are corrupt in it, that are benefiting from it, but there are people that I know very well that are engaging in this question of what can exist that can maintain some sense of civility within the Palestinian community if the system collapses, knowing that Israel is not just going to come in the next day and create law and order, for example, let's say in the occupied territories. They will just allow Palestinians to run havoc, maybe. Who knows? And so these are the questions that are being asked by some of the good folks in the authority itself. I'm, for one, again, would say that at some point, our leadership needs to make a tough decision. And that tough decision goes to the decision of resistance. We cannot have ministries and offices in Ramallah that are functioning while Palestinians are being killed. And the only thing is, how do we maintain the Palestinian Authority? And hopefully that tough decision will be made at some point. But people, as I said before, are tired of the lack of movement of our leadership, for sure.
Okay, thank you. We're just going to take one more question in respect for Sami's time because he has to leave at 8:30. So we're going to go out to Zoom, and Sima Dejani asks, are there Palestinians that are making Israeli atrocities worse by supporting their violence inside 1948 borders?
Supporting violence in 1948?
Through their violence in the 1948 area.
No, sorry, if you could say it again.
Israeli violence inside the 1948 borders.
Yes.
Are there Palestinians that are making Israeli atrocities worse by supporting Israeli violence inside 1948? Is the way their campaign, supporting Israel in their campaign on Gaza, she's clarified.
Are there Palestinians that are supporting the Israeli campaign in Gaza?
In Gaza.
In the 1948 territories?
Yes.
As far as I know, there are not. I mean, there are groups that have joined the Israeli army, and many of them are soldiers within the Israeli, some of the Druze. Where are there also Druze that completely reject that notion? Some Bedouins, and there are Bedouins that reject that notion as well. And so there are Palestinians or Arabs that have joined the ranks of the army, but you don't see these people being violent in the Israeli society itself, for example. And there is big debates happening within the Druze community. We know many Druze activists that are very upset and dismayed by Druze soldiers that have joined the army. Even the Durzim leadership has issued statement on this issue, and the same with the Bedouins as well. Again, it's one of those very tough situations, but that's just within their communities that there is the debate that continues to happen.
Yeah, thank you. I think she just wanted to get a sense for the kind of dynamics among Palestinians within 1948 Israel.
Yeah, I would say that most of the Palestinians within the 1948 territory, as I said, are worried, are afraid. And one of the question is, once Gaza, West Bank, will they be next? This is questions that are there. They are seriously asking themselves.
Folks, I want to bring it to a close. Please, let's thank Sami.
Thank you.